Hey guys, it is Wingy here and welcome to my first video of 2022, and I thought I would start it off in the most positive way possible by talking about what I think are some of the worst classic Doctor Who stories. Now obviously I'm doing an updated version of the list that I did at the very beginning of my channel. I've already done the top 10 best of the classic era, so if you want to go and check that out, it should be on my channel. It's only like a couple of videos ago, so go and watch it and see what's changed and what hasn't. However, when it comes to the worst, I've got to admit, thinking about it, similar with the best stories, my taste has changed somewhat over the years. And that means that certain stories that were on the list last time are not going to be on the list this time, and there's going to be some new entries. The only problem is, I couldn't really think of an order that I wanted to put these ones in. So the order that I'm going to talk about in this story isn't like number 10 is like the 10th worst and number 1 is the worst. It's all just sort of like, these are the worst ones for me. Put them in any order that you want, doesn't really matter, but either way, I'm not really a fan of any of these stories that I'm going to be talking about. As always, this is just my own personal opinion, so if you happen to disagree and your favourite story is on this list, don't matter. Like, I'm not trying to change your mind. Enjoy what you want, don't enjoy what you don't want, doesn't matter. This is just my opinion, deal with it. So to start this off is going to be, I guess, kind of a cop-out answer, because I'm gonna say any pure historical. I don't care which one. Pick one. It could be one of the Hartnell ones, one of the Troughton ones, Black Orchid, I don't care. The point is, I just really dislike the pure historical stories. And the thing is, I've never liked them, you know? I always prefer when, if Doctor Who is going into the past, it has some sort of sci-fi twist to it. Something like The Visitation, for example, where we go to the Great Fire of London and there's an alien threat there. It isn't just the Doctor, the TARDIS and his companions and then that's it. It's just like, let's just live out an event of history. Don't get me wrong, I understand why they were made, and yes, some of them do have their moments, but overall for me, I just don't enjoy them. I think Doctor Who is better when it does have that sci-fi twist, like I say. I don't just want to see history play out, but oh look, the Doctor was there. These are the types of stories that I find myself revisiting the least. Now whether that's part of the reason why Hartnell's era is the one that I come back to the least, I don't know. But either way, I never actively want to put any of these stories on. I always just watch them once, just for the sake of watching them, because I want to see every single story, and then unless I'm doing a rewatch, I will never just individually pick out one of these stories and think, yeah, I feel like I'm in the mood for that one. And that is a crucial factor, you know? If you don't want to rewatch the story, turns out you don't like it very much. Well, chances are that you don't like it, and in this case that is 100% true. I'm not interested in them. So I know that they have their fans, I understand why people like them, however they are just not for me. There needs to be other alien sci-fi things going on as opposed to just a historical event. Right, looking down the list, let's go and pick another random story out of the fucking abyss of shit. Let's go with Timelash. Now Timelash was definitely on my list last time as well, and it's staying around because it is genuinely crap. Thing is with Timelash, it is the weakest story of season 22, a series that for me is actually severely underrated. Colin's era gets a bad rap. Does it deserve it? No. Season 22 is actually a really, really solid season of Doctor Who, but Timelash is not one of them. What you have with Timelash is a story that could be better than what it actually is, and I think that's going to be a common thread throughout the entirety of this video. Like, a lot of these stories, they have potential. They could be a hell of a lot better. Problem is, they're not. Production value, as much as I don't like to throw it against classic Doctor Who, because I understand that there was budget limits with the technology at the time, it is a factor. Like, sometimes it does look shit, and when your main sort of thing in this story is like fucking Christmas decorations that people fall into with a ridiculous fade effect, it doesn't look great, which is weird because the monster design in this, I can't remember the name of it now, I want to say the Borg, but that's like a Star Trek thing. Either way, that thing, that looks incredible. Like, all the budget clearly went onto that. Also, the big disappointment for me now with this story is that Paul Darrow is in it, who is obviously my favourite character from Blake 7, another fantastic sci-fi show that is also hampered with budget constraints, arguably more so than Doctor Who. And the thing is, as much as I love Paul Darrow, he's shit in this story. Like, he's hamming it the fuck up, and I think quite a few people are in this story as well. I don't think Colin has a great performance. I wouldn't necessarily say he's bad, but I've seen better from him. And overall, this is a story that is borderline laughable. I think if you were to sit down and watch Doctor Who drunk, yeah, throw this one on. You'll have a great time. But if you want to just sit down and enjoy it for what it is, I don't think you're going to get much out of Timelash. Okay, let's pick another one. Let's go with Power of Crawl, actually, because this is a Tom one that I don't think I've ever really spoken about on this channel before, and now I am. So there's a first. Power of Crawl is part of the Key to Time season, which is also season 16. Overall, the Key to Time season, in my opinion, is Tom's weakest. I think there aren't too many standout stories, and even the best stories that you get within this season, they wouldn't be the best story in any of his other seasons. Power of Crawl is easily the weakest of the lot. The reason being is, for some reason, what they've done is they took a massive squid thing, like this big monster, and they somehow turned the entire story around it incredibly fucking boring. Actually, thinking about it, I think this was on my last list like 4 years ago. I did rewatch it in preparation, but I can't remember. I obviously haven't prepared well enough. Maybe I did talk about it then. Either way, the point still stands. This is dull. This is a 4-part story, and it is a slog to get through. Now, you can kind of have a little bit of sympathy with stories that are 6, 7, 8 parts, maybe even longer, and you think, Jesus, they are clearly stretching this out. But you kind of understand, because that's what they had to work with. 4 parts for a Doctor Who story in the classic era is a standard length. This feels like it's drawn out. The set design is plain and dull and boring, and this is a common thing in the Graham Williams era of Doctor Who, but I feel like the scripts, and sometimes for the wrong reasons, they improve it. This is just a dull script with a dull set. The cast do not stand out. I don't mind some of the stuff in this, like the giant Cthulhu thing when it appears is pretty cool. The location work is actually pretty cool as well. It's a lot different to what we typically see in classic Doctor Who, because, you know, it's not a quarry. But apart from that, there isn't too many things in this story that I'm like, oh yeah, I must go and rewatch Power of Crawl. I think I've got the Target novel of it somewhere, and even that was just crap. Like, I just don't enjoy this one. Whenever I think of Tom's era, and whenever I think of stories that, oh, I can't wait to watch, this is pretty much low by Flow Rider featuring T-Pain down on the list. I mean, I couldn't not talk about Silver Nemesis either, could I? Silver Nemesis, again, was on the list a few years ago, and as much as I want to like it, I just can't. Again, similar sort of thing to what I was saying with, which one was I talking about? Timelash, I think? I don't know. It has potential. The problem is, this Doctor Who story is 3 parts worth of 6 parts of material. Maybe not even that. Maybe it's like 2 or 3 stories worth of material. There is just too much going on in Silver Nemesis. I forgot the name of it then. There's just too much going on in this story to the point where I can't focus on it. The story itself can't focus, therefore I, as the viewer, I can't focus on it. There are some great things in here. I like the Cybermen in this story. I like the neo-Nazi element. I like those other people from like the past and shit. I like what they're trying to do, but I don't think it all fits together. It feels like several different jigsaw pieces from different puzzles all coming together, and it's just not going to make one clear picture. It's going to be a mess. I think, especially when you consider this was meant to be the 25th anniversary of Doctor Who, yeah, cool. I mean, you've thrown in the Cybermen because, haha, they're silver, and this is a silver anniversary. But let's face it, everyone says it's Remembrance of the Dalek. I think there's some really interesting aspects to the Doctor's character in this story. Oh my god, there's fucking jazz bits in this story. Like, why are we focusing on some guy playing jazz? I imagine, well, I know that he is a musician from around that time, but why are you putting him in this story? Put him in a different one, because there's already too much shit going on. Like I said, there's ideas here, there's potential here. The stuff with the Doctor, like I said, I do enjoy. I like seeing those little tidbits about who the Doctor really is, kind of. But then again, they're just hinted at, they're not really like for definite. So, but either way, there's just way too much going on. There's not enough focus or cohesion in this story. It is just a mess. It's an enjoyable mess, but let's face it, it is a mess. I need to start ticking these off so I remember which ones I've spoken about, because I've literally just jotted them down in any old order. Right, so that's them ticked off. Aha, so we're on the 5th story then, which is gonna be, pick one at random, Bosch, Curse of Paladin. I didn't even click on that with my pen then. It was a totally different one, but you'll hear about that next probably. Who's to say? Either way, Curse of Paladin. This is on here primarily for the reason, well, I mean, 1, I think it's shit, and 2, I know Monster, in the eyes of a lot of people, is considered the worst story out of the 2. and that's fine. But for me, because this story is considered such a gem of the Pertwee era, this is considered like one of the best of the Pertwee era, and people seem to really love it. Potentially it's even their favourite. I don't get it. Don't get me wrong. The aspect of Curse of Paladin that I genuinely love, and I mean this, I genuinely love it, is the Ice Warriors. I really like the fact that they're not the bad guys. I love the fact that there is that twist of the Doctor was prejudiced against them. He judged them wrongly. I mean, yes, he was wrong, but given past events, he was kind of right to be a bit suspicious of them. But either way, I love the fact that the Doctor got it wrong, judged the wrong people, went after the wrong people, and he was in fact wrong, and the Doctor gets to learn a lesson. Fantastic, a genuinely great part of the story. The problem is the rest of this story is so fucking dull and borderline unwatchable that when I rewatched this, and I watched it with my partner as well, we had to take a break because we just couldn't keep sitting through it. It just did not hold our attention whatsoever. Thing is, again, this is a 4-part story, and if you aren't keeping people's attention with a 4-part story, you're done fucked up. I can understand why people like this story, but I feel like the dialogue, the characters, the pace of this thing, the look of this thing, I mean, the sort of model shots where they're outside the city and they're on the cliff edge, that looks quite good, but the interior stuff, that's really bland. It doesn't really appeal to your eye. The characters are just there to say lines. It doesn't feel like this world is properly fleshed out. I don't really buy into the world and the politics of Paladin. I understand the message that this story is given, you know, the whole European Union thing, but I don't give a shit about that, so that doesn't interest me anyway. Like, up until you get the reveal of, oh, the Ice Warriors are actually good, and it was really this weird, like, pickled head in a jar that was the bad guy, like, I have no interest in this story. I'm just sort of, and even actually when it gets to the bit with the Ice Warriors, I'm sort of just like, oh right, it was him. Oh right, that's a turn up in it. I can't watch this one. I really struggle, and I have tried multiple times just to see if I can just get it, you know, like it'll just click and I'll be like, aha, this is why people love it. I don't, and I don't think I ever will, and I'm sorry to anybody who loves Curse of Paladin out there, the same way that you probably love some of the other stories on this list. It really just isn't for me. I couldn't have a, like, worst of the classic era video without me talking about the Leisure Hive, can I? Because this one, fuck me, is it shit. Again, it has potential. Again, there are some great ideas in here. But again, it just does nothing with it, and it ends up as just this incredibly dull slog. I mean, this was a season opener. This was meant to be like the revamp of Doctor Who. This was the start of John Nathan Turner's era. This was the beginning of the end of the 4th Doctor. Everything was changing, whether it be the music, whether it be the title sequence, the, you know, the costume of the Doctor, sort of everything around it was new. And to be honest, if you watch the first episode of this story thinking, oh, this will be my determining factor into whether I'd see if I like these new changes, you would fucking switch off. The Leisure Hive is definitely a victim of Doctor Who's poor budget at the time, because the whole thing with the tachyonics, they don't explain it well enough in the dialogue, and they physically can't demonstrate it well enough for you to understand it. Now, I know this was the exact same thing that I said 4 years ago. I fucking stand by it to this day. Not that it's going to come as a surprise to anybody. I'm not a scientist. I don't understand tachyonics. I mean, I'm pretty sure it's a real science, but I don't know if it is or not. So if it is or isn't, please let me know. But the point still stands. I don't understand tachyonics. Going into this story, I wouldn't have understood tachyonics. But the fact that I come out of it still not understanding what the fuck tachyonics are, that's a big deal. Considering this is more aimed at children, it's an even bigger problem. And the thing is, people might say, why are you going on about the tachyonics so much? It's the biggest crutch of the story. Like, if you don't understand the tachyonics, you don't get the rest of the story. Yes, there are moments in here that are pretty good. I do like the fact that Romana has quite a bit to do. I like that they aged up Tom and that his Doctor is old for a significant period of the story. What I don't like is this weird demonstration bubble thing where Tom just gets ripped into pieces, and it's like, what is that? That's just video editing, isn't it? I also don't like the bumblebee people with the, like, Christmas baubles that drop off their head. I mean, I like the design of the Famasi, and I love the way that they're shot, actually. The way that you see bits and pieces at a time, like a foot here, a tail here, an eye there, and you never really see them. And then when you see them in the full you know, shebang. They're not awful. Like, they're not great, but they are pretty good. But the thing is, you don't really see much about them. And again, it's another twist of, oh, well, they're actually not the bad guys. They're kind of just, like, there. So again, I do like, similar to Curse of Paladin, I do like the fact that they pull your feet from under the rug and it's like, ah, you thought they were the bad guys. Actually, no, they're not. But yeah, this is just dull. Again, the dialogue is not great at all in this story. It's very music heavy as well, which is quite unusual for Doctor Who around this time. Usually there is like significant chunks of music that play throughout the story, but you feel like you get a bit of respite where it's like you can just let moments sit without the music coming into it. This story, you don't get that. You are bombarded with music in every single scene. Is it good music? Yeah, it's fine. You know, it's very 1980s Doctor Who, but there's just too much of it. So yeah, for me, The Leisure Hive is and forever will be Tom's worst story by a country fucking mile. And it's a shame, because like I said, I really wanted to like this one when I first watched it, and it's been years now and I still don't fucking like it. So we'll just tick off Leisure Hive. What should we go with next? I mean, I'm asking you guys when, you know, you don't know what's coming up on the list, unless you fast forwarded the video. But either way, fuck it. Let's go with Time Flight. Time Flight, again, is one of those stories that I really, really wanted to like. And again, the production value really doesn't help this one. But at the same time, the story itself doesn't help itself. So, as much as you can say that, oh, well, the budget doesn't work here and it doesn't work there, it's not really the point. The script isn't good enough. And that's, you know, plain and simply why this is on this list. First and foremost, this follows on straight from Earthshock. Adric has just died. How do you think the Doctor and companions are going to react? Do you think they're going to be sad at the loss of their friend? Do you think that they're going to be upset or devastated, or, you know, that it's going to be something that they have to deal with throughout the rest of the story? Or is it going to be like that Jeremy Clarkson meme where it's like, oh no? Anyway, if you said the latter, you'd be spot on. They just don't give a shit. And now I understand that Adric wasn't the most popular person, but you'd think throughout the story there maybe would be a moment or two where the characters just sort of sit down and take in everything, that their friend has just died, but they don't. And from the off, that kind of puts a sour taste in your mouth with this story. But let's not pretend that Adric dying and characters not caring is the main problem with Time Flight. It's just a symptom of the rest of the story because it's written incredibly poorly. You've got stuff with the Master, which is very questionable and potentially racist. You've got Concorde or planes or stuff at the airport where they go to this other place and it's just grey. Everything is grey. Maybe it's a metaphor how everyone feels because Adric's dead. Everyone's grey. No, it's not that. It's dull. There is nothing about this story that makes you want to revisit it. Is it nice seeing the Master again? Yeah, absolutely. I do like Anthony Ainley, and I do actually like his dynamic with Peter Davison. This didn't need to be a story though. I mean, yeah, you've got the thing with Tegan at the end where she leaves, which is fine, I guess, if she was going to stay gone, but she doesn't, and she comes back in the very next story. So, does Time Flight have its redeeming features? No. I'm going to say no. Does it look shit? Yeah. Is it written quite poorly? Yeah. It's kind of all you need to know about Time Flight. Let's go with the Time Monster. I spoke about that one. I've spoken about this a few times actually. The Time Monster, again, so much potential, but it just drags on. It's boring, and there's a thing in it called Tom Tit, which is ridiculous. Now the thing is, I do actually quite like this a little bit more now compared to when I first spoke about it in the original list. The problem is, I don't like it that much more. I do like what the Master's trying to do, and I do like his plan. I do like the idea of this story, but it's all about the execution, and that weird fucking bird thing, Kronos, whatever it's called, looks awful. It's laughable. It's clearly some bloke in a bird costume, which doesn't work. You've got the whole stuff in... It's Atlantis, isn't it? It is. I've not just made that up. Yeah. That stuff is shit. Actually, the stuff with like UNIT in the modern day, that isn't terrible. So I'd say half of this story is pretty good and the other half is laughable. Then again, you have got that bit with the Doctor where he makes a device out of like a wine bottle and forks and things like that, which looks ridiculous. But you know, the Doctor's meant to be this really genius scientist that can come up with a solution with anything. You'd think it'd be a bit better than a fucking spinning wine bottle though. I do actually like the cliffhanger where they think that Mike Yates has blown up. That's pretty cool, but you know it's not going to be the case. So even then that has a few points knocked off it. Then again, you can say that with any cliffhanger. Well, it's not what we thought it was going to be, obviously, because it's a fucking cliffhanger. But the point is, the good moments are severely outweighed by the shit with Atlantis, which doesn't interest me. It bores me. There's some ridiculous things in this story. In places, it is laughable. So it is definitely one of Pertwee's worst stories, I'm sorry to say. I'm not sorry to say. Fuck it. Fuck the Time Monster and fuck every story on this list. That's why we're doing it. 2 more left. And I have got to say, these are genuinely stories I wish I liked, and I wish that they didn't have the reputation that they did, but unfortunately they do, and I don't fucking like them. So, any particular order, first and foremost we'll go with Twin Dilemma. Arguably one of the biggest missteps in Doctor Who's history. Not only is it set at the very end of a season of Doctor Who, so a Doctor's first story is the last story in a season, and this is going to be the audience's lasting impression of that Doctor. So, as a way to bring viewers back and make them fall in love with this Doctor, they decided to make him totally unlikable, a bit of a coward in places, incredibly arrogant, and try and murder his companion. Yeah, not the smartest move. The thing is, nowadays, that necessarily doesn't matter because we won't have that few-month gap between the end of this broadcast and the start of Attack of the Cybermen. We can literally, on BritBox, DVDs, Blu-rays, whatever it is, we can just flick through and go to the next story. So it's not that big of a deal. But it doesn't change the fact that they do start Colin off with a disadvantage, because his characterization in this story, as much as I understand the in-story reasons for it happening, it's still not a great idea. Or at least it could be a great idea if you executed it properly. Maybe in his first story, he has a few moments where he's a bit questionable, but he's still the 6th Doctor that we eventually get to know. Not start him off as just this awful, unlikable bastard. Also, the fact that this story is, again, incredibly dull, incredibly boring. You've got these twins in it who can't act and for some reason are like really fucking important, even though I don't fucking care about them. But the biggest problem with this is obviously the portrayal of the Doctor. Now, it's not Colin's fault. You know, if anyone wants to know, I genuinely do love the 6th Doctor. He is a great Doctor and a very underrated Doctor, and I think he was given such a difficult start as the Doctor that it really, really was hard to come back from. And I think he's still feeling the repercussions of this episode to this day. Maybe not as much because of Big Finish and because Colin obviously appears at like pretty much every convention that he can, which is awesome. I have obviously met Colin as well and he's a fucking top geezer, so it is such a shame that an actor who I think is genuinely unique as the Doctor and is also a very, very likeable person had to portray a Doctor that is the total opposite of what he should have been given. Like, that portrayal of the Doctor is the unforgivable bit. The rest of the story is below average, yes, but it's really, really not helped with the direction that they took with the 6th Doctor from the get-go. It was a huge misstep. I don't know why I'm ticking things off because there's only one story left, so if I don't get it right then, well, I'm a moron, even though I am anyway. And that is, of course, a story that I'm not sure actually appeared on the last list, and that's Time in the Rani. Again, another Doctor's introduction story. And Time in the Rani is just laughable. And the thing is, I wouldn't say that this story is boring or dull, because I don't think it is. I just think it's bad. But it's not one of those Doctor Who stories where it's so bad it's good. It's just so bad. There are moments in it that I do like. Weirdly, I do actually quite like the regeneration, even though it is clearly Sylvester McCoy in a wig. And I do like some of the stuff with the Rani, like where she's pretending to be Mel, and I like where the Doctor puts on his new outfit. Apart from that, I couldn't give a fuck about this story. It's laughable. It's not even like special effects or anything like that. It's just moments throughout it where I'm like, wow, someone wrote that, someone gave it to someone else, who's then, you know, script edited it, and was like, yeah, this is good enough. Let's put people in front of a camera, make sure they've learnt all these lines, and we'll get them to act it out. And you know, I'm sure I'll be fine. But it wasn't. It was this. And again, this is arguably as damaging to the Doctor as the Twin Dilemma was, because even though McCoy's Doctor isn't running around strangling his companions, this story is just so ridiculous, over the top, and awful that people must look at it and think, Jesus Christ, what has Doctor Who become? And I know that season 24 as a whole has its fans and that people have an appreciation for it, and you know, McCoy is a relatively popular Doctor, particularly amongst a certain generation of fans, but it isn't a great start. And as much as McCoy has such charm and wit in his performance, sometimes it is too much, and I think that's very evident in season 24, but this story especially. I think the villain design, are they Tetraps or Pteroleptils? I always get them, it's Tetraps, isn't it? They look okay, they don't look bad, but I just don't really feel threatened by them. They're almost cute in a way. I mean, potentially it's a good thing for the fear factor because it's like a false sense of security, but at the end of the day, this is just a laughably bad Doctor Who story. Again, if you want to just sit down and watch Doctor Who and enjoy it for what it is, don't put this on. If you want to get fucking tanked with your mates and have a laugh, stick this in your DVD player, because you'll have a great time, because it is very laughable. And in fact, me just saying that has made me think of a brilliant idea for a Doctor Who series, watching Doctor Who drunk and reacting to it. So, if you want to see that, let me know, and I will of course start with Time and Ronnie. That doesn't change the fact that it is objectively a bad Doctor Who story, even though it has its moments. And there we are, guys. That is my updated version of the 10 worst classic era Doctor Who stories. Like I said, they were in no particular order. You can rearrange these in any way that you see fit. I've literally just written down 10, technically, and just randomly went through them. I just don't like any of them. Some of them have moments, some of them have potential, like I said, but either way, these are just not the creme de la menthe, or whatever it's called, of Doctor Who. These are just some of the worst. So, in the comments below though, guys, let me know what you think. Do you agree with my list? Do you not? Whatever yours is, let me know down below. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you leave a like on it, subscribe for more. Social media and Patreon links will be in the description as always, so if you'd follow me on any of those things, I'd absolutely love you forever. But until next time, guys, you take care of yourselves. Goodbye.